to grill the meat or the patty in medium heat.
Hello, today we are making a batch of corn and black bean chili. We're using a 90-10 ground beef, and we grilled it in the form of burger patties on the grill outside in order to pre-cook it. And we're gonna do about 2 pounds here for the chili. We're gonna start chopping this up. We're doing this in a 7-quart crock pot. Depending on how large your crock pot is, you will need to adjust your amount of your ingredients. I also have a 4-quart crock pot that I sometimes use. This is chopped up pretty fine now, so that should be good enough. Now we're going to start adding our ingredients. We are going to do 2 cans of everything until we see how full the crock pot is, because again, depending on the size of your crock pot, it's difficult to determine how much you want to add. If we need to add a 3rd can of everything, we will. So we're going to do a can of petite diced tomatoes. This is Italian style. Leave the liquid in there. A lot of the seasoning is in the juice. Okay. We're going to do a can of tomato soup. We'll do a can of tomato soup. This is the base of the liquid part of the chili. This is the tomato soup. We'll do a can of black beans. I drained the water out of these already. By leaving the water in with the black beans, it really doesn't add anything to the chili. If anything, it makes more of a watery chili. Okay, we'll do our 2nd can of black beans. Our 2nd can of diced tomatoes. When you have these cans sitting in your pantry for a lengthy amount of time, you want to wipe off the top of the lids because they will get dusty. So that way you don't get dust and dirt in your food as you're cooking. Okay, another can of tomato soup. Okay. All right. For now, that's it for our canned ingredients. Okay, we're going to stir this up. We're basically trying to get the meat off the bottom and stir this into the beans and the tomatoes. A good way to remember how much of everything to add is you add the same amount. Like I'm doing 2, 2, 2, and 2. I'm doing 2 pounds of ground beef. I'm doing 2 cans of beans, 2 cans of tomatoes, 2 cans of tomato soup. I also chopped up 2 green peppers. We're going to add those now. Give that a quick stir as well. Mix that in. The nice thing about chili is you can pretty much add whatever you want. I'm adding the things that I like. Peppers and onions, tomatoes. All right, now we're gonna do the onions. And again, this was 2 onions. Oh, if you could smell this. Smells wonderful. And it hasn't even started cooking yet. Okay, and we also have 1 head of garlic. I strayed away from the 2, sorry. You can add a 2nd head of garlic if you want, but when we add seasoning later, we're actually going to add some dried garlic powder towards the end of the cooking. So, how much garlic you can handle, that's totally up to you. And this is looking very nice. Now, if you look at the bottom, there's very little moisture in here. So what I like to do is I like to take my tomato soup cans and fill them just with a little bit of water. And I'll stir that around in there to try to get any of the remaining tomato soup out of the can. Do that again because that's not a lot of water that we used. I don't recommend adding more than 1 full can of water, only because you're going to turn your chili more into a soup. We're getting the rest of the seasoning out of the tomato cans. If you remember, these are seasoned with basil, garlic, and oregano. Now, as this cooks, water is also going to come out of the onions and the peppers. So, as of right now, I think we have a nice amount of stuff in here. Now, keep in mind, we still have about 2 inches to the top. So, we can add some more stuff if we want, but we also are going to add 2 pounds of frozen corn, so we need to leave room for that. So this is going to be a corn and a black bean chili. We're going to add 1 more can of black beans. So here's our 3rd can of black beans. Another thing that's really cool about chili is the different colors that you have going on whenever you're adding different ingredients. We got green pepper in here. We got the yellow of the onion. That's actually looks white, but it's a yellow onion. We have the red from the tomatoes. We could have added yellow, orange, or red peppers. I figured since we had the red tomato in here, and we're going to be adding yellow corn later, that I would just go with the green peppers. All right. And I'm going to do the other can of tomatoes, because we still got more room, and we should still have room for the corn to add later. So it's always good to have an extra can or two around. See how this looks. If we have room for the tomato soup, we'll add it. If we don't, we're not going to add the third can. Looks to me like we're going to have room, so we'll go ahead and add it. Again, I'm going to add a little bit of water to this. Okay, and that's, you don't want to have more water than that in here. So we'll mix that all in. Yeah, that's the maximum amount of water you want to see in here. Because when we add the corn later, there's going to be water coming out of the corn as well. One reason why we're not adding the corn now is if you add it now, the corn's going to turn to mush if it's in the crock pot for several hours. We add the corn at the very end, and it sits in the crock pot with the chili for about an hour after the chili itself is already done cooking. And just the heat from the chili is going to bring the corn to the texture you want it and the proper cooking. All right, we have an inch from the top. That'll definitely be enough room to put our 2 pounds of corn in whenever this is done cooking. You can either do it on low temperature for 8 hours or on high temperature for 4. I like to do low temperature whenever I can, as long as I'm not in a hurry, because I just think things taste better when you cook things low and slow compared to high. And put the lid on this, and we're gonna go plug this in and let it cook for about 8 hours, and I'll see you in 8 hours. All right, we're getting ready to add our seasonings to the chili. We're at close to 8 hours in the crock pot. And the reason why we add the seasonings at the tail end of the cooking process is if we add them earlier, you're basically going to cook the entire flavor out of the seasonings. So by adding them at the end, you're adding the flavor at the end, and it's going to stay with whatever it is you're cooking in. In this case, it's the chili. And let's take our lid off. All right, we're going to start off with the chili powder. We sprinkle a layer all the way across the top. We stir this in. Actually, stir it under. So we got 4 of these we're adding. So they will get mixed pretty good after we stir them in a couple times. We're going to do cayenne. Now, cayenne's going to give you the heat to the chili. The chili powder is going to give you the flavor. Cayenne's going to give you the heat. We're going to add, I'm adding it once. If you like your chili really hot and spicy, you can add it twice. If you don't like spicy chili, don't add it at all, or add it very sparingly. The one thing that you can always do, you can always add more, but if you add too much, you can't take it back out. So err on the side of adding less, because you can always add more. We're going to do some garlic powder. Stir that in, stir that under. onion powder. Okay, all right, we're going to come back in about 10 to 15 minutes and add some more seasonings. For right now, what we do is we're going to put a little bit on our tasting spoon, and we'll let that cool down, and we'll see where our flavor's at once that cools down. In the meantime, we're going to let this continue to go for another 10 to 15 minutes, and then we're going to add a second time some of the seasonings again. We found out we need a little bit more chili powder. Everything else, the onion powder, the garlic powder is where we want the taste to be at. Let's go with that. We'll stir that in. All right, we're also going to add our corn right now. That's going to fill up the crock pot pretty much to the top at this point. Stir that in first. We'll add some more. Again, we're adding the corn frozen. And that might seem a bit weird, but there's so much heat in this crock pot right now that even though we're going to shut the crock pot off, we'll put the lid back on, and that corn's going to cook in here, or thaw and cook over the next hour, even with the heat off. And that's going to give you the texture that you're going to want with the corn, so that it's not all mushy and soggy. Now that looks pretty. And you got all these colors going on. Now wait till you taste it when it's done. Our chili is done and ready to serve.